Hey everybody, welcome to X-Oriente, the new voice of Brotherhood.
Hello, all.
How you doing? I am one half of your host, Eric Diamond.
I'm the other half of your host, Jason Van Dyke.
That's fantastic. Um, is our sync off?
Say that again?
My sync seems to be off. Like my lips are
Oh yeah,
moving. Yeah, my sync is definitely off.
oh yeah.
Hmm.
I've seen better.
Hmm. What to do? What to do? I don't know. Should we go back off and come back on?
Hmm. Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Why
So
not?
anybody who's already here, if you're here, we're gonna go off if it's more than just a few seconds. Check the
Well, it
feed.
seems like it's back up. I think we're
Oh,
I think we're caught up again.
really? Okay. All right. Great. Well, welcome to X-Oriente. This is a great episode. I always love having guests, and today we have a distinguished guest, worshipful brother Jon Ruark of the Masonic Roundtable. And there you are, John.
Hey,
Hey,
It's going great.
awesome.
So John, you're a past master of what lodge again?
The Patriot Lodge, number 1957, in good old Fairfax, Virginia.
Yes, the Patriot Lodge. Okay, so if I go out of sync again, please forgive me, but I think the audio is just fine. So anyway, today we wanted to talk about a book by John William McNaughton, he is the recently retired what do you call it? Sovereign Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite Northern Jurisdiction, and the book is called "Reclaiming the Soul of Freemasonry." And the book was sort of mentioned in one of the Facebook groups that I I'm trying not to frequent as often from last show, and and I thought, a book on Freemasonry. I think I'll check it out, and I did, and I definitely, I would say, had some issues with it. What about you, John?
Just a few, just a few. I mean, it's a hyped up book. The guy obviously carries a lot of Masonic weight and credibility, and has written many articles for the, I think they call it Northern Light magazine, of which
hmm
he proud of because he has a very specific view of masonry today and masonry in the future, and he carries that theme through, as you would expect any author to carry a common theme through further writings. So we'll talk a little bit about that tonight too.
Mm-hmm. And before we get to that, Jason, is there anything Masonically that you want to plug?
No, no,
Oh,
I'm
cool.
fine.
All right.
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
All right. So the book opens with McNaughton asking, "What business are we in?" And this is kind of, uh, I realized that he's talking in an analogy, but like as soon as I got to that, I realized that I was headed down a rocky road, and mainly because of the idea that we're in a business. And so what I find, and I'm actually guilty of this myself. When I started, actually it was before I started X-Oriente. I wrote an article for a Masonic magazine. I can't even remember which one. It was so long ago. Um, but called Marketing Masonry. And basically, what I was trying to do was sort of take the techniques of marketing, this field that I work in, and apply it to sort of the recruitment of Masons, and it got picked up. I think it ran in like the Grand Lodge of Australia's news magazine and a couple other places, but years later, I just realized that it's just not a good analogy because we're not in a business. We're not here, and I talked about that I sort of did an episode where I talked about, the idea of stakeholder masonry versus consumer masonry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, does that bother you guys at all? Like, I mean, or am I just being overly sensitive?
No, not at all. And I think that I feel kind of the same way about things. It's it's an easy analogy to make and it's an easy pit to fall in these days, which is to compare anything to business, government to business, masonry to business, anything to business. And if you're successful in business, you can be successful. You just apply that, rinse, repeat, and apply that to whatever, and it'll work. And actually, that's not really the truth in my experience. And I think that I was guilty of the same thing when I first started in masonry. I thought, wow, this just needs better marketing. We need a better image, a brand image, and everything will be fine. It's not necessarily the case. So I feel the same. I feel definitely the same way you do, Eric.
John, what about
so
you?
I'm going to be a librarian, and I'm going to say that it absolutely applies. And I've thought about this a lot too. I work for the U.S. government, and I've used that line a lot. We have to think of things like a business. The first counter argument is, well, we're not a business, right? Because we're not for profit. Same thing for your fraternal nonprofit organizations, right? But if you think about it, even if we're not for profit, we're for maximizing utility of what we have. Okay? So whether that's per capita, right, that gets collected at the grand level, to be prudent with how they spend those dollars, how each dollar is spent at the lodge level, and to we provide a service, which is this fellowship, fraternity, initiatic experience that all comes at a cost that each lodge can set. And what we should be doing is maximizing the utility of each candidate going through, so that way they're getting their dollar's worth, as it were, because whether or not we like to admit it, our product, Freemasonry, is in competition with other products that are out there like Netflix, internet, Facebook.
Sure.
Right. So, yeah. So you truly treat it as a business and look for maximizing profit. Yes, I will agree with you that is not the ultimate gain. However, you need to run things in a maximizing utility aspect, where every dollar you get, you're making sure that it's not being wasted, so you can provide the highest value to either your internal stakeholders or your external stakeholders. Ideas, thoughts?
Okay, I mean, I can appreciate that. I just I think the problem is that you run into this idea that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if it works in business, it must work in the fraternity, and that's not necessarily the case. And it also kind of begs questions of governance, which you can sort of apply that in government a little bit, because you've got an agency that is, where you've got a cabinet secretary, that is, kind of like a CEO. I mean, he does report into a kind of a more political structure, but I don't know. Look, we have bigger fish to fry. So one of the things that McNaughton says is, and I found this statement almost offensive. He says, "It is all too easy for men to stay home rather than endure meetings that emphasize edicts and the archaic practice of often badly delivered, memorized ritual." Now, before my head explodes, John, help me, Obi-Wan.
So, obviously, that's a very loaded statement, right? And again, if you go back and read some of his articles, you'll find that he's consistent, right, with other things he's written. I know that it was about 2 or 3 years ago, maybe a little bit further back, in a Northern Light Masonic, Southern Masonic jurisdiction, or Northern Masonic jurisdiction, he did write something to the effect of, well, what if we just kind of got rid of the ritual altogether and just focused on taking care of each other. And he said it very almost hyperbolic to get a reaction. He sure did. And so that one statement is consistent with his viewpoint. And unfortunately, it doesn't back up some of the other data that we have. So
tell me about that data.
I would argue, by the way, that the Northern Masonic jurisdiction doesn't have ritual in the first place, but that's just me being a jerk. So, I mean, what's left to drop, really?
Maybe it's a good thing. So some of the other data, I've started going on a little bit of a tour, and I will be recording very, very shortly, like hopefully before Thanksgiving, the results of the survey that I did a year and a half ago. I've been busy with kids and family and life and jobs and all that. So, but I do have a package already that I've given to the Masonic Society conference this summer, and then once again locally in DC. But you'll see that specifically one of the things that the brethren like the most out of Masonry, when I asked them a variety of aspects about brotherhood and the dining and ritual and esoterics and philosophy, ritual was still high on that list. And so basically, over half of the respondents said that ritual was very important to them. It was either extremely important or very important. When you use that Likert scale of like 1 to 5, most guys rated it 4 or 5. So that's just the data that you'll see soon. So sorry, I don't have that at the ready. But that his statement does contradict what I'm already seeing. And looking at how the questions were asked, his collection of the Scottish Rite members, and I think we really haven't got really clear on where he got his data from. And I was hoping to see that when he launched his book, because the only survey we know of that came out of the Northern Masonic jurisdiction was the survey last summer that was about a 12-question SurveyMonkey survey that came out. And while people were taking the survey, they were actually changing the questions on the fly. And that's kind of like rule number 1 that you don't want about any sort of data conditioning, right? To make sure that your data is solid. Because that's
like rule number 1 in the scientific method. Don't change the experiment while you're doing it.
Let's just throw some more variables in there. It's like cooking at my grandmother's house. Let's just see what we can add in here.
Right.
So he references, and I haven't seen this because I don't think they've actually published it. The 2016-2017 Scottish Rite member and prospect study for recruitment and retention. Is that the SurveyMonkey you're talking about?
I believe so. I was trying to find the actual link through my Facebook groups, but of course the SurveyMonkey link is dead now, so it's hard to tell exactly which his source is.
Mm. So he says about that.
How many people were in that survey? How many does he claim?
He claims about 3,000, a little over 3,000. He calls Scottish Rite Masons, which when a link gets spread around the internet, and I know it came up on different Facebook groups, you don't know exactly. And that's a problem that I had with my survey as well. I'll admit that the best way to do this would be to set a unique link that you have to have a specific either name or password or unique identifier for every single person coming in to ensure data, right? I can't do that because I'm not at any Grand Lodge level to enforce that. But they're at the Northern Masonic jurisdiction level. They know all their members, and they could have restricted that link specifically to the Northern Masonic jurisdiction. I responded to the survey, and I'm in the Southern jurisdiction, so
yeah, right.
Well, it may be a different survey because what he says is that they hired a marketing firm to do it. And he kind of goes to great pains to sort of qualify that. So maybe that was a pre-survey or something. We may be talking about different instruments.
Also 12 questions gets you at the heart of nothing. I mean, 12 questions, is barely enough maybe to get one small, tiny little slice of information. It would seem to me that having a professional marketing company, they're not going to do a 12 question survey.
Noble intent. And if it is focused just on Northern Masonic jurisdiction. 3,000 respondents is actually a great sample size.
Yeah, well, I think my understanding is that they according to the book, they did Scottish Rite, group of Scottish Rite Masons, and then a group of non-Masons across the board. So
it seems to me there were two separate questions / surveys that were sent out.
Yeah,
the book is bifurcated in that sense, where you have basically the precursor of this book talks about what is the impression of Masonry, its values in the public to non-Masons, and that would have they did have completely different questions than the members to see what the members want, because he was kind of asking two questions, which again is a concern, where it's kind of who are we, at least in the eyes of the public, and then what do our current members want.
Yeah, but that's honestly though, it's kind of interesting, because asking it that way is kind of interesting, because you're able to kind of compare the two answers and say, all right, well, are we being consistent? Right? Is what we portray and what we show people, is that the same thing as you get if you buy into that image? Are we delivering on that promise? So that's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. And so he does a good job he does a good job trying to link values to the Scottish Rite in particular. So one of the conclusions that he comes up with in this book is to take what millennials value in priority order, what the Gen Xers value in priority order, and what baby boomers value in priority order, and compare those values word for word, right? Because everyone kind of thinks of justice differently and integrity differently. But if you just do it at an abstract level, when he aligned the priority level of these different terms, that he came to the conclusion that baby boomers actually had the highest match. If this was eharmony.com for Masonry, baby boomers had the highest level of matches of values with what the value statements are, at least of the Northern Masonic jurisdiction. Therefore, the logical conclusion is baby boomers are a better target audience for the values of Freemasonry. Dun, dun.
Okay, so I wait before we get there. So let's just talk about the segmentation for a second, right? Because he starts out by making the argument that the average age of the Freemason is 70, right? First of all,
that bears out.
Yeah, but
actually,
does average tell the story? I mean, should we be looking at the median age?
That's a good point.
Right? Well, sure. So from what I remember, and I don't think it's changed radically at the southern jurisdictions. The southern jurisdiction, I think these days is down to, I think they only have probably around 150,000 members these days. And the last data I saw, which is probably a year or two old, was that the first quartile went to 71. Therefore, that meant that 25% of your members, or 75% of your members, are older than 71.
So Chris Rulli is asking, what is the median, right? So the median,
right?
The median is the exact middle of a range of numbers. So the average to figure out the average, you add up all the numbers and you divide by the number of numbers you have, right? That gives you the average value. The problem with that is that, if my numbers are 1, 2, 3, and 100, right? I basically have 106, and I divide that by 4, right? And that gives me an average, but that doesn't tell me, right? It doesn't really give me a real good character of the range of that number. So typically when you're doing statistical analysis, average is just one thing that you look at, but other things that you look at are things like the median. The median will tell you like what's the midpoint.
Right. Mm-hmm. A good example of that is when I was looking at the survey data that I did, we had one Mason respondent who was 90 years old, but also waited 70 years to join an independent body.
Right.
So when I asked, what was the length of time, if I was looked at the average length of time, I'd have that 70-year wait to join an independent body, mixed in with the guys who joined an independent body that afternoon, right? So it absolutely throws your data off. And so if I looked at the average, which I did, the average length of time was 22 months from raising to joining an independent body. But looking at the median and the mean, or the median and the mode, 12 months.
Right.
Yeah. So he says, all right, so the average age is 70, and that's a bad thing, right? Because it means we're aging out. And then he quotes from Laudable Pursuit, which is the paper by the Knights of the North from a few years ago. He talks about the rejection of Freemasonry by the baby boom, and then he says, at first blush, millennials might be the right target for Masonry, but then he proceeds to take that option apart because he says millennials have the least money and discretionary time of any current generation, which is true, one could argue. But by targeting boomers, you're looking at a group whose average age is 65 right now. Right. So you've just, you've retargeted, Masonry for 5 years. It just seems a little.
I mean, that's like, it's honestly, it's like saying, as far as for gardening purposes, I like fully grown carrots. And that's what we're looking for is fully grown carrots, only fully grown carrots. Well, that's awesome until you're done with your fully grown carrots. And now where are you? You have an empty garden and it's completely barren. And I can't make that more obvious. I mean, come on. I mean, I'm sorry, but that argument is on its face silly. And I wish I could say it in a nicer way, but I can't.
Well, if you look at the Social Security website, a man reaching 65 today can expect to live on average until 84. So it's at 19 more years. So we have only 19 more years of the craft if we only target that generation.
John, you're killing my buzz here. He when in criticizing the millennials as a target, he says most are missing the paternal connection that was once so strong a draw for young men to join Freemasonry. And I didn't understand this, and so I wanted to get your take on it. Do you think he means that their dads weren't Masons, so they're not being brought into the family, or that they're living in single parent households? When he talks, he says most are missing the paternal connection that was once so strong a draw for young men to join Freemasonry.
So if I extrapolate that, this is a blanket statement that baby boomers were not joiners, and so there is a gap in Masonry of baby boomers, right? And so if the millennials are the son of baby boomers, then therefore they don't have that immediate paternal link that my dad was a Mason, so I'm going to join. Whereas the baby boomers themselves did, right? The silent generation or greatest generation, one of those two. And so there at least is that hook, that that in marketing terms that they've had just waiting to be acted upon. Mm-hmm. However, if you look at, I don't know, I try to think of things as more value statements, right? Thinking of what is the actual value to Masonry, not just that my father was in it, because my father wasn't. I'm a first gen Mason as far as I know. So because I joined for what it stood for, not just because my parents were in it. Mm-hmm. So while it may be true, it's not true in all situations.
So he says that boomers are the. I did want to point out. So Greg in the comments, he says McNaughton's hypothesis is that by attracting boomers now, it will in time cause interest from the millennials who will follow behind in joining, which I would disagree with only because we don't have any evidence to support that. I mean, we have a whole generation of boomers that rejected Masonry because their fathers were in it, and that didn't necessarily lead to a mass joining simply because the previous generation were members or joined. And remember, that was that weird little spike after World War II where we had that big upsurge in Masonic membership after the war, right?
Right. It's like it's the idea of trickle down masonry, basically. And I don't know.
It's kind of like trickle down masonry.
I love that.
Trickle down masonry. That's a great phrase. So one of the other issues that I had with the methodology was that they're asking sort of attitudinal questions. So they would say things like, would you be interested in joining an organization that promotes friendship? Like
No.
Like what are people going to say?
Screw friendship. I don't want an organization like that. I'm looking for an evil organization.
So yeah, so and
promotes enmity.
I can tell you that in consumer marketing, where I spend most of my days, that's not a really good question to ask. I mean, you can ask about you can ask about attitudes, right? You can say, what are your feelings?
The nicest statement you've ever made. That's not really that nice, good of a question.
Well,
no, it's terrible.
No, it's yeah.
Kind of rhetorical question you ask right before you try and sell someone a Kirby vacuum. Are you interested in a vacuum that promotes friendship?
Well, that's the thing. Is like you say you could say, would you be interested in buying this product? Right? They'll tell you yes. Because they're not
sure.
People will say
right.
what they think you want to hear. What you have to do is you have to say, how much would you pay? What would you do? Yeah, right. You have to structure the question.
Have they told the truth by asking them the same question in a different way? I totally get that. But I'm just saying that, like, that survey question, if indeed it's true, like, are you interested in an organization that promotes friendship? Honestly,
they're attitudinal questions, and that'll tell you, I'm interested in friendship, but that doesn't tell you very much more about intent, right? And that's really what they were trying to get to. They're trying to, like we would call it purchase intent, right?
Well, right, yeah, but you can't just start off with what you think their intent is and just ask them, hey, was this your intent? I think that was it. Oftentimes people don't even really know consciously what their intent was, and you have to do some digging to get there. You know what I'm saying? And so the risk that you're taking by asking a question as banal as that is basically, would you like to take the easy way out of this survey? Yes.
Check.
Are we done? Yes.
Well, the other way I like to think of it too is, wording the question is so critically important, which I spent a lot of time making sure that I wasn't leading too much the witness, because I mean, you can get survey data any way you want it to look, because you can ask the question, do you like Donald Trump or punching kids in the face?
Right.
Most people pick Donald Trump between the two.
Sorry, kids.
Right. Right.
So, John,
John,
it's very important that when you see the results, you marry it up with the question and how it was intended. Again, it's a little bit different than the way you guys pitched it, but still, it's just asking the question the correct way is extremely important to get quality.
Yeah, because you have to eliminate the bias.
There's I don't know if anyone out there remembers, and I know that this will set people off, but the documentarian Michael Moore used to have a television show on TV called TV Nation, and they were a series of short, little provocative documentaries, that like he does. But the best part of that show is that to go to commercial break, they would give actual results. They used a major polling agency to actually do representative sample polling, which is expensive as hell. And they asked these people these, actual questions, but they were all ridiculous. And it was basically to show, like, listen, sometimes survey data is just survey data. And, even if you pay tons of money and you have a statistically valid representative sample, it's useless. So he would ask questions. My favorite question, and I will never forget it. It's the greatest thing I've ever seen on television and the best waste of production money of all time. The question was, they asked 1,500 college students if they would punch themselves in the face really hard for $5, and it was a 99.9% yes. Beautiful.
So as an example of that, one of the answers, one of the responses, he says, he quotes, 60% of boomers believe that they will have a meaningful impact on society in retirement. And he uses that as evidence as to why we should target boomers. Well, I would only point out that, of course, they believe that. They're boomers. I mean, if you know anything about the boomer generation, they are a very self-important generation. I mean, this was the Pepsi generation. This was the talking about my generation, right? They were very generationally aware. If you'd asked a boomer in 1960 whether their question would have a meaningful impact on society, they would have said yes. They would have said yes in 1980 when Gordon Gekko is greed is good, and in 2000. I mean, I think that's not a big surprise, but yet even though that generation has been, aware of its self-perception on the impact on society, that has not led to joining Freemasonry.
I'll agree with that.
That's fair.
Yeah. And I think the evidence to back that up is the numbers of, the weak number of baby boomers who are Masons.
Yeah. Okay. So then he points out, he says that boomer values are more aligned with Scottish Rite values, which is, you had brought that up earlier, John. The values that they quote are justice, integrity, service, reverence for God, toleration, and devotion to country. And my first thought was, first of all, I was surprised that brotherhood was not on that list. But do any of you guys, I mean, I know I'm asking two Southern jurisdiction guys, but who picked these as the official Scottish Rite values? Like, when did that, I don't remember that.
Albert Pike, but now that we've taken his statue down, we don't care. Too soon? Sorry.
And that's again interesting. Being a Southern Masonic jurisdiction guy, I know that I believe I need to make sure this is 100% correct, but the values I've seen come out of the Northern Masonic jurisdiction and the values of the Southern Masonic jurisdiction are different, right? And again, also are maybe extensions of the Masonic values, right? Because to go along with that, there was another part of his book where he did mention that only like 8% or 3% of people could name what the tenets of our fraternity are. And I'm wondering, how many Masons could you quiz right now and see if they knew what the tenets of Freemasonry is?
Yeah, right.
Not even an independent body.
Yeah, I mean, and it can even go a little bit more simple than that, John, is that when I worked at the Scottish Rite, Southern jurisdiction, the Grand Commander was fond of asking large groups of Southern jurisdiction Masons assembled what the royal secret was, which is the whole point of the entire ritual of the Scottish Rite. You get to the master of the royal secret, which is the 32nd degree. So what the whole point, everything that is building up to, is one thing, and that's the royal secret. What is it? And hardly anyone knew.
There's no place like home.
Right.
Isn't that it?
It's right.
That I had the power to go home the entire time.
Nobody. Yeah, right. And no one ever understood when I said 42. But whatever. And the thing is that, like, right.
Yeah.
The royal secret is different in the Northern Masonic jurisdiction.
So right there you go, and that's where I was going with this, John. You're 100% right. It is different, and that's it's mind blowing. It's really funny, and it's really indicative. So I think of the Northern and Southern jurisdiction and how they've developed.
So do either of you guys know what the values are that are different from the North? No? Okay. All right.
I mean, listen, all of those values. So in the Scottish Rite, especially because there's so many degrees and there's so much that you're going through, they pretty much hit every value, right? Justice, right, and truth, so on and so forth. They hit them all. And so, where they pop up and what degree might differ, but both organizations, for the most part, they hit them all. What John and I were talking about is that the final lesson, what's supposed to be, the total secret of the organization is different.
Yeah.
Even though it's technically the same organization, like it came from the same roots.
Yeah. So what's interesting is, I do a lot of work with values. That's kind of the thing that I'm most interested in at work. And I've done a lot of work in this. And the problem is that these are not universal values, right? So there's a guy by the name of Shalom Schwartz. He's a social psychologist who teaches out of,
good Irish Catholic.
Yeah. Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And he's developed 65 universal values that are, consistent from culture to culture. They're not dependent on. So for example, patriotism. It's an American value, but it's not necessarily, a universal value. There are places in, like Bedouin tribes that just don't give a crap who the government is, and
correct.
They wouldn't be all that loyal to it, even if it. So it's part of this is that I think that the values that they're choosing, for example, the value of service, that's highly interpretive. And so John, to your point, to say that someone values justice, well, one person's sense of justice is very different than another person's sense of justice.
Yeah, just look at our political climate right now. Not going into, a lot of politics. It's true that justice is in the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah. So, John, would you be interested in joining an organization that helps me to become a better person? Think carefully.
Still think. Can I phone a friend?
So, all right. So here's.
What if I told you that organization is closer than you think?
That's right. Well, all right. So, I know we're making fun, but lovingly, what his conclusion is that if we raise men's awareness of what is core to Freemasonry, fraternity, compassion, and self-realization, it stands to reason that they will join. And I couldn't disagree more, because I think that, again, that sort of speaks to what you said earlier, Jason, that it's an awareness problem. If we just make them aware that, wow, we have this great tradition in fraternity and blah, 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 that, that they're going to be like, oh, well, I didn't know, sign me up, and I just don't.
Again, the data guy, would love to see the effectiveness of some of these Grand Lodges. I know the Grand Lodge in Maryland for a couple of years has been doing these billboard campaigns and TV ads, including on like major sporting events. Can we trace that back to a specific number of people who have joined Freemasonry, right? Because that is a pure awareness campaign right there, right? That, hey, Masons, we're here, come to your closest lodge on our open house day, come on in. If we could see the numbers of, is it one guy? Is it 100 guys or 1,000 guys that are joining purely based off of that one data point, right? Not Dan Brown, not anything else, not a friend who about the awareness campaign, purely on the awareness campaign. That would be great to see, but we just don't have those numbers from any Grand Lodge at this point.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the lack of sophistication of most Grand Lodges. They'll hire a market research firm, and they think that they're getting like top-notch rocket science talent, and that's not necessarily the case. So what you're describing, John, is something we in marketing call attribution, which is like, can we know, what did what was the last thing that a person saw that right before they purchased, and so it's called last touch point attribution, and there are different attribution models, but it's a very, very sophisticated science, and the answer is yes, you can know. You can, like I remember the Ben Franklin ads, time was, those ads, if they track them properly, they could know, like how many men joined Freemasonry as a result of that. And I'm sure some have, like I'm sure that but it's not, we've had awareness campaigns before, and it's never really, and we did have like an amazing awareness campaign just a few years ago in the form of Dan Brown, who turned, Freemasonry and, secret societies into the hottest thing since sliced bread, and it still didn't, move the needle. So that tells me that it's not really an awareness issue. Sorry, go ahead.
I think what's interesting, Eric, is that was just thinking about this, and that perhaps what the issue is it's a commitment issue, and this might be a point that McNaughton kind of brings up, but in a different, he says it in a different way. And that's that he's saying that, like, with boomers, why we should target boomers is they have available time, they have available money, right? And what that speaks to is the ability to make a significant commitment. And Masonry is a activity that requires a commitment, and a pretty significant one, really. You have to spend money and time on the organization in order to get anything out of it. And so, maybe that's kind of our issue there is who are we? Is it even possible to get that commitment from people? Are we just expecting too much?
I mean, that's a good question. I think it is. I think it is possible to get that kind of commitment, but I think to get it, you have to.
But not from large numbers. We're never gonna go back to 1920. It's basically what I'm saying. When we had huge groups of men going through the fraternity, it's just not gonna happen that way anymore. There's too much. Modern life has far greater demands. You know what I'm saying? There's too much competition for the investment of our time. Possibly. And that's not even to mention money.
I mean, possibly that you might be right.
I mean, I know that's kind of dark, but
no, I don't think it's necessarily dark. I just think that like I think about like the 1920s and what a change that was from the 1860s, and one could make the same argument in 1920, yet that's not necessarily how it.
Well, I agree, and you're 100% right, but I think that we've gone to a point where we have a tipping point where there's so much available to people these days that we have truly opened up vistas that were never available to men before. And now, they used to come to Freemasonry because, there was no internet. How am I going to find out what, maybe someone sparked a little interest in the Kabbalah. And then I heard, well, these guys down at the Masonic Hall, they talk about Kabbalah all the time. You should go talk to them. Okay, great. These days, if I go, I had this spark I want to learn something about Kabbalah, I just go right online. I can find it. It's much easier. It's much, much easier. I don't have to know somebody. I don't have to know a friend. All that information is available to me. So that's kind of the argument I'm making, I guess. But and it's, and you're right. In some senses, that argument is, it's the same argument that it's been for generations. Damn kids and their telephones. They're never off the telegraph. But I don't know. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't. I think that the idea of distraction, it's really about value, right?
Sure.
So if you really value something, then like I look at a guy like our friend Patrick Craddock, right? He's the apron maker extraordinaire. Well, his thing is like reenacting, right? I mean, I've seen his pictures on Facebook and stuff. He goes all out, and he does not just Civil War reenacting, but World War I reenacting, World War II reenacting. I mean, that kind of activity is no small commitment. It takes money, it takes time, it takes a lot of things. Yet
Absolutely.
He makes that time because it's important to him. So I think the idea of distraction, I think in a, if you're thinking about masonry as consumer masonry, then yes, you are competing with the Xbox and with the internet and Netflix and stuff like that. But I think if you really hit something in men that is valuable to them, they will make the time. They will carve that time out. But they have to understand what that value is, and I don't think they do. I don't think we do a very good job of walking the walk, right? Mm-hmm. And in fact, so one of the things that I'm researching now, for a future show is sort of the idea of morality. And so, so we say, okay, we're a moral system, we're a morality. What does that mean? That's going to be really hard to answer. As that's for another show.
Yes, this is all. I've been kind of quiet because you guys have been on a different tangent of our value proposition in a modern age, right? Which could be an entire show in itself.
Yeah.
But to bring it back to awareness, right? Let's just assume we have that value proposition locked in. We know exactly what we offer for this, category of men. I'm going back to what a piece of Barack Obama's success getting elected in 2008 was attributed to him doing in-game advertising on the Need for Speed game. So on the Xbox platform, I believe PlayStation 4 as well, the billboards that you saw as you were driving your virtual car down the road were actual ads, and they had ad space that was paid to EA, and Barack Obama took out an ad on a virtual billboard where these guys playing the game are going to see this ad go by, and they're like, well, that's interesting. Why would a politician go for an in-game advertisement? And so I've read some articles that say that they can show an uptick in millennial voting record based off of that attributable ad campaign. So why aren't we doing that in every Assassin's Creed game? Why don't we have
have Ben Franklin show time was
absolutely
in the tavern,
right. Masonry is
have you considered Freemasonry?
You can make friends in that organization. I like it.
But no, but that's a very interesting point, which is sort of like, where do you create that awareness among that target, right? And bringing those kinds of things into things like games, into things like, just in Facebook. I mean, like, if you want to do an ad campaign, do a Facebook ad campaign, for crying out loud,
Cost you $1.
Oh, I know. Like, just for this show, like, I ran an ad. I think I spent $15 and I got 6,000 people reached.
Dollars.
Right? Yeah.
Not huge Grand Lodge, buckets of money you need to throw at it.
That's exactly right. Totally.
So switching gears just for a minute, so what he says is that he says the biggest challenge facing the Scottish Rite is related to interpersonal conflicts, and this is something that I would agree with. I mean, I kind of had a bad experience years ago, and in fact, it was responsible for me creating X-Oriente in the first place. But I would agree with that. But I think that the way that the Rite is structured, and I'm not sure how much of this is in the southern jurisdiction as well, but I would imagine it is. He bemoans sort of this careerism, but when you kind of incent an organization around this idea of a red hat or a white hat or a purple hat or a whatever, mm-hmm. I think what happens is guys get very competitive for it, and you do have a lot of I'm the guy who runs the lights, and if I run the lights for 15 years, they're gonna reward me with a an honorary 33rd or something like that. And since nobody really knows, I mean, they keep it a very closely held secret, like what the criteria is, right, to get this award. Everybody is just sort of trying their best to kind of game the system, and that can really kind of corrupt the idea of the organization, right? Because it's basically this big competition,
right,
to be liked,
right,
or to be
mm-hmm.
effective, or to donate lots of money, and nobody really knows, right?
And they try and combat that by saying, well, if you ever talk about the 33rd or if you ever ask for it, you'll never get it.
Right.
And so what that does then is that instead of kind of trying to control for that competitiveness, instead what it does is it makes everybody really passive aggressive. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, and so yeah, I would totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
So what he said, and this is telling, because in the data, this is the one piece of data that I found really interesting. He said, people who are members for fewer than 5 years and members for more than 20 years reported the highest level of satisfaction. Why this is so is not clear, and more study is required. Reactions?
So what are the numbers again?
People who are members for fewer than 5 years and more than 20 years were most satisfied with Scottish Rite.
Those are your fanatics. Duh. Here it is. I mean, let's do exactly what I said I wouldn't, which is let's apply that to products, right? Let's apply it to soap. The people who buy soap brand new are like, hey, new soap. It's awesome. I love this new soap. Those are your biggest fanatics. The person in the middle doesn't care. I just bought that damn soap again. And the person who's been at it for 20 years really loves that soap, and so like it's a bell curve. Of course that's how that goes. So it's a curve of interest. And I would argue that applies almost to anything.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a sunk cost fallacy applied to those who invested 20 years. Right, because now they have an emotional attachment to it and aren't thinking like, "Well, I'll just quit now." No, I've put 20 years of my life into this thing. I'm going to get that red hat one day. So if I just hold.
I bet you those 20-year guys are the guys who have red or white hats. Those 20-year people are the most successful, quote unquote, of those members. So of course they're the happiest with it.
I would agree with that. I would say that if you're under 5 years, you haven't been exposed to the organization long enough,
correct,
to really kind of see the dark side of it. And if you're there for more than 20, you've mastered it, right? You've gone fully to the dark side or whatever. Like you've figured out how to work the system to make it work for you, and so now it's working for you. So you're kind of the top of the heap. But there's a lot of guys who get who. And I've seen it. I know a lot of guys who have earned their honorary 33rds and they worked very, very hard in the fraternity, and they did a lot. I mean, they gave a lot. They gave a lot of their discretionary time. They gave a lot of their effort, and it can be a slog at times. I mean, I just remember like some of my friends who were just no, I can't do this. I have to go organize a golf outing, or I have to go do it's just it can be grueling.
Right.
So he, all right. So now we come to this part where he talks about the value of memorization. Right. So
I've got the quote pulled up. This is great. This is one I highlighted in the book, if I may.
Please.
Memorization, a useless, archaic skill in our modern age, is the arbiter of who is deemed worthy to lead.
Now, in some places that's true, right? So in some places, like, you can't become Grand Master unless you're on the Grand Board of Examiners, and that's what I think you guys call it, the Guardian of the Work or something like that.
Grand Lecturer.
I mean, should that qualify somebody for leadership?
That reminds me of a quote that I heard after I was in Masonry for a few years. The district deputy grand master at the time was giving a talk in our lodge and used his big thing was on education, Masonic education, as is mine. And he stated a fact that resonated with me, and so much that I'm mentioning it here today, which is that in Virginia, the qualifications to be worshipful master are that you pass an oral proficiency to know how to open, close the lodge, run a ballot, run the degrees from the East. He said, he also followed up by saying, and nowhere does the Grand Lodge of Virginia require you to know what any of that means? So, while memorization is important, it is a criteria, at least in the Grand Lodge of Virginia, to advance and to take the Oriental chair. Yes, the meaning may be lost, and I think we can all think of a few Masons that know the ritual very, very well, but maybe not necessarily the context.
I can't. And so here's my thing. I cannot. And by the way, for all you out there who know me, you know how much I'm struggling right now not to swear. And it's so hard when I'm talking about this because this is the type of stuff that just gets me. And so
wait, I have
my
to,
best.
I have to say, I can totally tell. And the reason I can tell is your Wisconsin accent is coming out.
Right. I can't, I just.
Don't you know?
So here's the thing. So memorization in Masonry, especially as it applies to ritual, is there for a reason. And it's not necessarily, that it makes a member a better member by memorizing this stuff, or any of that stuff. Why it's there is really for candidate experience. It's for the people that are in the lodge, who are in those officer chairs, who are running a degree or opening and closing a lodge. Those people are putting on a show. In simplest terms, they're putting on a show for the people who are on the sidelines or for candidates for the degrees as they go through. And so memorization is in my thoughts is absolutely essential. It's the first thing that you need to make sure is perfect. And that's like going to a Broadway show and saying like, well, Broadway's great and all, but they need less of that memorization crap. Who cares if they've memorized their lines? Let them bring out a piece of paper, perhaps a teleprompter. That's just stupid. It ruins what you're trying to do. It ruins the show. It ruins the portrayal, and it's dumb. I'm sorry, and I know that that's probably going to hurt some feelings, and I'm going to get crap for it, but I don't care. It's stupid. It's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Period. End of story. Masonry would be great if it wasn't for so much masonry.
Don't hold back, Jason.
God, sorry. It's just that one makes it well up in me. And I'm really proud I didn't swear during that, by the way.
I got to admit, when I was going through the degrees and learning as a young Mason, I was really questioning why do we have to learn all this old English?
Absolutely.
Terms I'll never use anywhere else. I was really struggling with that because I was trying to get to the context, the so what. I was doing very, very well working with my mentor, trying to break down, okay, what does this mean? Where does this come from? How am I supposed to apply that? And not so much the word perfect description of the line, the ritual, the quote, whatever. and then I listened to this podcast called X-Oriente and learned about the Pardes method that is a way to apply critical reading or exegesis of different texts, specifically like the Torah. And you really need to have that surface level, the pashat. Am I getting it right? Mm-hmm. The surface level. You have to know the literal direct meaning, the word itself, before you can peel back the layer and then start to understand some context about some of the allegory behind that. And that really, I got to say, it was very influential. I'm going to brown nose here for a bit. It really helped me understand the critical importance of knowing the word perfect ritual, and how then once you know that you can quote ritual backwards and forwards on the spot, then it'll make it much easier to say, okay, let's break apart this whole line, and now let's dig in deeper what it means. Because if you're fumbling over the words, then you're definitely going to miss some context. So
absolutely,
I don't know.
Yeah,
I've grown.
It worked.
Got one.
Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words, but absolutely. And there's a educational researcher by the name of Howard Gardner, who is, he writes about sort of teaching methods and things like that. And one of the things that he says, one of the things that was kind of coming up is like, why are we teaching kids facts and figures anymore when we should just be teaching them how to Google, right? And in fact, McNaughton says this. He predicts that in the next 5 years there'll be few brethren who learn significant parts of the ritual, and in 10 years, none. Right. So what he's saying is that because of Google, people don't have the capacity to memorize things. But what Gardner says is that to be an educated person, you need to know how to think, but you need to have something to think about. Right. So the memorization is the thing that gets that text that, into your head. So now you can start to do things with it, like take it apart, like,
Correct.
ruminate on it, like compare parts of it back and forward.
A better analogy for this, Eric, is, why read books? There are audio books. What does it matter? Why would I learn to read? Other people could read for me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. We could just
Literally
we could
the same
memorize.
thing.
We could memorize epic poems. But the best example I know of is Rex Hutchins. You guys both have met Rex, right? Rex is awesome. Rex is like the only guy I know who's actually been cited by name by the Southern Baptist Convention as reasons not to join Masonry. Which is like complete, like Rex,
so.
you are like a giant among men.
Yep.
But the first time that I met Rex Hutchins was 2003. It was my first year at Masonic Week, and this guy, who looked like an old cowboy, basically sat down in one of the conversation pits at the Hotel Washington, and I quickly realized he had the entire King James Bible committed to memory, the entire thing.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure that's not the only text that he has committed to memory like that. Right.
Not at all.
And what that allowed him to do was to take apart any argument that was happening in that pit, because he had command of the text and they didn't.
Correct.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, John, that's what you were kind of getting at, right?
Yeah.
It's
command.
Is the ability to command it so that you can understand it better.
That's part of the whole, you've made yourself better by being able to command material. That's when we say we take good men and make them better, that's part of that. That's a physical representation of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then he makes the argument that the ability to memorize should not be the sole qualification for leadership, which I agree with. I mean, you can have a guy who's a good ritualist
reasonable.
and a terrible manager, right? So that's
sure.
Or
the other way around.
Yeah, and he talks a little later in the book about the need for education that is that's available online. And we I agree with that. I mean, that's why this podcast and your podcast exists, right? Is to provide people with Masonic education.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't help but think that what he's setting us up for is, degrees on tape. And I know
degrees on.
Yeah, more degree. Yeah, exactly. More degrees on tape. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't look, I get that this is a method of, that younger people and boomers and everybody, we watch, we're spectators. We do a lot of that. And so that might seem like it's an ideal way to sort of impart information, but it really is a terrible experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, like when you go to theaters now, they're falling all over themselves with technology, trying to make it more and more and more immersive and less about that proscenium, because there's something that gets lost when you're not experiencing it. And when you're not seeing, looking in the person's eyes when they're providing the ritual. And one of the problems that I've always had with the Scottish Rite is just the idea that you watch degrees, that you're not experiencing them, you know? And I understand, you know, from a historical perspective, like why that is and, you know, how that evolved. I just don't know that that's like, we shouldn't be pushing further in that direction.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, there's two layers to that. One, there's the initiatic experience alone. And for those who have gone through the degrees of Freemasonry a proper way, understand that you get much more by the act of experience, to your point, vice observation, right? And so that alone, that's about all I'll say with that. But what goes hand in hand with that is my second point, which is psychologically, people value things more that they've committed more effort in doing. Basically, the harder you work at something, the more you're going to find value in it. And so if we're talking about men who want to find value in Freemasonry, don't make it easy for them is a short way of saying that, right?
Yeah, right.
Don't
Absolutely.
open the door and let anybody in and make the degrees, you know, just something you can, you know, Netflix and chill over the weekend and you catch up.
We don't do co-masonry here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. No. You know, the other thing is that like there's a bonding experience that's going on there as well, John, and that's, you know, like you said, so psychologically you've got, you know, the things that you work harder for are the accomplishments that you're the most proud of. The things that you suffer through with someone else bind you together. You know, that's, I mean, it's literally the central thought of Band of Brothers, right? Is that was a difficult thing that they went through, and it forever bound them together. You know, and it created these strong ties between men, and that's what we're trying to do too. Now, you know, we're not trying to do it in the same way, but I mean, obviously that. But that's what we're trying to do, is make it difficult. There's that's a shared experience. That's a mountain that we all climb together.
So thinking about this, so we've kind of taken apart this book. I think, you know, I applaud Brother McNaughton for writing it, and I applaud him for getting those ideas out there so that we could talk about them and debate them. And this is certainly, you know, this is a critique, not, you know, of the ideas, not of the person, for sure. But what would be your, let's start with John. What would be your prescription? How would you fix the Scottish Rite? How would you make the Scottish Rite and Freemasonry in general more relevant to the non-Mason?
Wow. Geez, that's a loaded question. Solve all this. That'd be good. I mean, there's a couple of
World
layers
hunger is
here
next, so
that make it a little bit complicated. Is that Scottish Rite Masonry is an extension of Masonry, right? So, as you'll see when I put these stats out this week, Masonry has a problem, a value proposition problems, you know, and all the same issues, maybe not at different scales, but the same thing, all that McNaughton's trying to do. And he's looking backwards. And this is exactly the same thing Brent Morris did, trying to look at Southern Masonic jurisdiction data to extrapolate backwards how we can solve Masonry as a whole, because 1 in 3 Blue Lodge Masons are Scottish Rite Masons, according to his data. So if we can look at a sample set of a third of those Blue Lodge Masons, we can tell a lot about them. So how do we make, I'll rephrase your question. How do we make Masonry more relevant? You know, I think some of the conclusions that he's made are, I won't say flawed, because they're based on the data he had, but they may be misinformed. And to relevance is a critical factor here, because I'm totally 100% lockstep with you, Eric, that it really is a value proposition problem that we have, that we need to make sure that we are exposing the value of Freemasonry compared to anything else, any other competing priority that's out there. And I do think we have a product that we are selling for people's time and attention, maybe not for dollars, because Masonry is pretty cheap, but But for I mean, geez, if you think about it, it's cheaper than Netflix subscription in most places. So that we are selling a product, and we need to make sure that that product is relevant to the time and attention that everyone has. And one thing I was going to say earlier, to your point earlier, was that we all have the same 24 hours in the day. People will find value, or they'll dedicate time to things they value. And so we just need to make sure that we are filling that niche of something that they can't get anywhere else. And that's, in business terms, a unique value proposition. What is the one thing that only you can do here, or seemingly only can do here, that you can't get anywhere else, right? And if that's, a mystic tie, if that is a brotherhood, a face-to-face brotherhood that you can't get over Facebook, if that is, I like to use the phrase, anybody that I could call at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday if my tire broke down, right? You can't get that on Facebook, but you can get that in this fraternity. I could call any one of you guys, and you would be willing to help me out, and I would be willing to do the same. Mm-hmm. And so if we focus on those things that are uniquely ours, not just, hey, let's go hang out and have dinner. Well, you can do it at the Elks, Moose. Oh, by the way, they're all failing too. You can do that at church. Right. Church membership numbers are going down too. Okay, so what do we do differently that no one else can do? We have to find out what that essence is, the quintessence of it, and make sure that is being advertised.
What about you, Jason?
Yeah. I mean, amen. I mean, that absolutely, that's great. The only thing I would add to that is, I would first start with saying that there are no easy answers to this thing. There's no, we're not going to be able to make this into a listicle. You're not going to get the 3 easy, steps that no one knew about how to fix masonry. And no survey data is going to give you those quick, simple answers either. So, you really can't look for a panacea for this stuff. That being said, if I was to make a switch, I would follow with what Jon said. It is a value proposition, and I would concentrate on the lodge level. Make your local lodge better. That's it. In my estimation, I think that's the biggest thing you can do. It's not the only thing that needs to be done, but it's certainly the most important, which is make your local lodge the best it can be. Make sure that its members who come and that they value it, and the rest kind of takes care of itself.
So one of the things my prescription would be, we live in an age where brotherly love is under assault, relief is under assault, and truth is under assault. And those are our tenets. And so I always come back when I think about like fixing masonry to what most worshipful brother Joe Crociata once said about a decade ago, and I never forgot it, and I think about it all the time. And he was looking at, we were in Shelley's, and he was looking at some ridiculous Entertainment Tonight type. I think it was like, something about, I think it was like when Miley Cyrus or something like that did something crazy, or someone like that. Maybe it was Britney Spears. I don't know. But he just looked up and he said, God damn it. We were once the shock troops of the Enlightenment. What happened? Right. And I've always, that's always stayed with me, that this idea that we are the shock troops of the Enlightenment. And we really were. I mean, I was reading today the Wikipedia entry on the Enlightenment. There was a whole section on the role that Masonic lodges played in the Enlightenment, and it was this place for discovering truth, for questioning things, for critical thinking in a safe space. And even though Masonry as an organization didn't do that, it created the conditions. It provided the raw material so that people like Voltaire and people like Mozart and people like Spinoza and stuff like that could kind of go out and do the things that they did. And so my feeling is that, if I were going to try to appeal to a millennial audience, I would would start there. I mean, when you look at the superhero type movies that are out there now, like Avengers and Justice League, and it's this idea that we're coming together to fight for something worth fighting for, and I think this is completely worth fighting for. And if we structure it right and build the right tools and systems and education and stuff like that, that is what I think will cause men to flock to it. A certain kind of man, not every man, but a certain kind of man that values those things and thinks that those things are important for society. And I would only just add that in looking at the Wikipedia entry for Enlightenment, I came across another Wikipedia entry called the Dark Enlightenment. Are you guys familiar with this?
No.
It's terrifying.
But
we're gonna do a show about it. But it's basically like if you took everything that's kind of happening right now in the world, right? There's a whole philosophical movement behind it, which is sort of like it's anti-democracy. That they believe that democracy has failed, that monarchy or totalitarianism is the way to go. The idea of rule by elites, the idea of manipulating information. I mean, it's mind blowing. Like just the idea that this is a thing and that there are blogs dedicated to it and people like espousing this, and it's a thing. It's a movement. The Dark Enlightenment is a movement. So if ever there was a need for a Justice League, right, for a brotherly love, relief, and truth league, that time has come, my brothers. That time has come.
Right.
Time to suit up. Let's go.
Suit up. Yeah, really. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I just want to say that someone, Ryan Reed in the comments, he asked about lapel pins. So
I think he was saying what are the solutions? Lapel pins. Well done, Ryan.
More lapel pins. Yes.
Well, we are here to help. So if you would like a lapel pin, you can become an X-Oriente executive producer. See what I did there?
I did. That was nice.
I'm a professional.
We call transition. Well done.
You can become an X-Oriente executive producer for a pledge of $5 a month. You can make sure that awesome shows like this keep going on, and we can make Masonry better together, along with our sister blogs and podcasts like the Masonic Roundtable, like the Winding Stairs. These are all great podcasts, and it's important. I feel like it's important work that we do. I mean, a lot of times, like if you publish a book, you get a lot of hoopla, but I think it's this kind of electronic conversation that stimulates a lot of Masonic conversation. So we could really use your help. If you go to our Patreon page, it's patreon.com/X-Oriente, make a pledge. You will receive, we just got our new kits in. We're just waiting on the envelopes, but we have a lovely lapel pin and some materials for you. And soon we're going to have some exclusive content. Patrick is here, and he says more lapel pins and fish fries and green bean casseroles and hand-painted aprons. Yes. So visit our Patreon page and support the show if you like what you hear, so we can continue to bring it to you. John, I want to offer you, plug away, my friend.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate it. This has been great. I always enjoy a chance to hop on the show, talk to both you fine gentlemen, and hopefully look forward to seeing you at Masonic Week in February. So it's around my birthday. I'm just saying.
You will, whether you like it or not.
Let's see. A couple little points before we go to shameless plugs. I was able to look up some stats from Grand Lodge, Virginia. And the average age as of a couple of years ago was 53. So it's not the 70, maybe in the Scottish Rite northern jurisdiction,
Sure.
The average age. But the average age is quite a bit lower in Virginia. So that's hopefully a good sign. And I do have the breakout by age range. It's about every 5-year breakout what that percentage is. So there's hope that it's not all a dying fraternity, but again, we have to capitalize on that, and that's my big plug for my data that I'm rolling out here again this week. So I'm saying it live, so I have a commitment, and I'll get that out. But you'll see that we really have to focus on our current membership today and not chase tomorrow's dreams. We have to focus on the customers, to use business term, that we are losing, our paying customers, our current members that are they're voluntarily not paying their dues. And that is something we have total control over. And I have some suggestions of how we can go forward from there.
Cool.
But
so how could we get our hands on that data? Like how are you going to release that?
That's a great question. So when I took the survey to get people to respond, I said that, and I asked some very specific questions about sexuality and salary. So in order to do that, I made sure, my word as a master Mason, I would not reveal the raw data. That's been both a blessing and a curse, because I have so much good data that I can't share it to the greatest extent. So I will be putting together, you'll see this week, a package of charts and graphs and data that we'll be rolling out. But a lesson learned for next time, I will be rolling out the 2018 version of the survey after the new year, and we'll make that completely wide open, that anyone can see the data, anyone can manipulate the data and look at it. So stay tuned for early 2018 for a new survey with some of the same questions, some questions that have been changed that were either useless, not very valuable, and some new questions added for 2018. But I think you guys will be interested in seeing how some of the conclusions that I was able to draw from this data this past year at times completely contradict some of McNaughton's conclusions. But that can happen depending on the who was surveyed and how the questions were worded. So stay tuned to the Masonic Roundtable channel. That's a shameless plug for a little podcast that I run with a couple other guys, and we are live every Tuesday night, 10 p.m. But you can catch us on YouTube or iTunes or anywhere you get your podcasts anytime after that.
Cool.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Will you come back on the show? So once we've had a chance to digest all the data and stuff and talk more about it.
That'd be great. In fact, I know that there's just so much data and what if scenarios, I won't have captured it all. So I want you guys to think about when I roll this out. Hey, because of the questions you asked, can I see how many Knights Templar in Texas make more than $250,000 a year? Those kind of questions. And what do they value out of Freemasonry? And so if you want me to slice the data differently, that's the best time to sit on the data, chew on the data, and then let me crunch some numbers again to provide maybe a little bit more value that you're looking for.
That sounds great.
That's awesome. Thanks, John.
So thank you for being our guest, and thank you for listening. I want to thank the people who came to the live version and helped us with comments. We'll be back next time with some more great programming. Until then, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
And Fiat Vox.